Welcome everyone. Why is it that with Kant, or thanks to Kant's transcendental logic, that we can fly airplanes and spaceships? Now this sounds bizarre, I know. Kant did not, when he was living in Königsberg of all places, which he never left of course as well, never dreamed of, the fact that's now been made, that it is his transcendental logic that burst open the possibility to fly airplanes and spaceships. Why do I make such a ridiculous, bizarre claim? Now, I've had very good philosophy teachers. And that a philosophy teacher is not someone who, is someone of course who can roam through the palaces of the great thinkers, but is also someone who can tie this together with what is today. One of them is Professor Max Gottschlich. He's an outstanding Hegel scholar, but more than just a scholar. He's a thinker. And what Max once said many years ago in Vienna at a seminar held on transcendental and dialectical logic in Kant, Fichte and Hegel was the following. If you came in this morning on the bus, or you took an airplane to come to Vienna and you did not break out fear and trembling, you are a firm believer in transcendental idealism. So I will now try to explain in a compact way, of course, why that is the case. What Kant does in the first critique, what he provides there, what he gives us, is not an epistemology. An epistemology would mean the question of how do we know that we know? How is it that we know what we know? How can we know that what we know is true? How do we know it all, etc.? These questions are to some degree related, of course, to the first critique, but that's not his question. Kant's question, or his project, is to critique metaphysics and to soothe and calm the battlefield of metaphysics. More precisely, also to make sure and establish again and justify again the regularity of the world which had collapsed, the unity of being and thinking which had collapsed with Hume. So he has, if you like, a certain strategy he pursues against the skeptics, against nihilism. However, what he establishes with his transcendental idealism is as the result of it, is a Herrschaftswissen, a knowledge of dominion, or a knowledge of power, of control. And how far? Again, it's not an epistemology, it's not how do I know, but the result is a knowledge of control, what Weber called Herrschaftswissen. In what sense? In the sense that the categories residing in subjectivity structure, through transcendental apperception, the manifold of appearances which may or may not be grounded in things as they are in themselves, so that objectivity for Kant is in fact posited by this interplay between the appearances of the manifold and the way in which the subject orders those manifold appearances through time and space as the forms of intuition, but also through the categories. Now, we won't go into the categories in time and space here, really, but what we're looking at is the following. As I said before, these appearances may or may not be grounded in things as they are in themselves. We don't have access to things as they are in themselves. They are in the, let's just say, the realm, and that's maybe even saying too much, in the realm of the noumenal, not accessible to us. So what we lose is an access to what things are, to their essence, which could show itself by itself in our response to it, to speak with Aristotle. Hence, the world is set up, or what becomes the world with Kant, is set up in such a way, and of course, again, he has to do this in order to ward off the skeptic, the specter of nihilism, and to make room for experience as well, but an experience that is structured by subjectivity. So I will say this now on why it is that we can fly an airplane. Think about it in this way. The resistance that would come from a natural object is crowded out with Kant in such a way that we become the sun around which the planets whirl and turn and move. And at the same time, we don't have really access to what things are as they are in themselves, but to the way in which we represent them. So, with transcendental logic, we can posit a priori. Transcendental means a priori, necessary condition of. We can posit how, in which way, something will react before anything occurs, before any experience. Hence, Kant says, first sentence of the first critique, in the A edition, the first chapter, that experience is a product of the understanding. So, the understanding corroborates a priori the result that it would like to get, and can posit in such a way the necessary parametrical setup so that, for example, the kerosene in the airplane will react always in the same way as it has been posited a priori outside the realm of time before. Now, we could say, well, we have experiential values of airplanes, do we? Is it normal that we fly? No. So, in the run-up to this, we don't want to, I don't want to historicize this or so, but maybe even as a stronger example, look at spaceships. Human beings can fly and leave the atmosphere. There's no experience that went into anything before. Yes, there have been experiments before, but the way in which the experiment itself works is already by a transcendental logic. A logic that posits in such a way that the experiment brings the desired or a desired result, and with the result of what has been posited and corroborated before, the experiment gets refined so that what's being pulled out of nature becomes more and more what is the desired result, which is, for example, to fly an airplane from A to B, or to fly a spaceship from A to B. Again, because the question is never, what is space? What are the stars? What is the moon? What is air? No, the question is just, what's the resistance of the air? What's the level of gravity? How much kerosene will we need, given all of our calculations beforehand, in order to shoot this thing to the moon or to the Mars? And transcendental logic, again, the logic which sets the a priori necessary conditions. None of this is just normal or ordinary. What Kant tears open with the transcendental idealism is a realm that was hitherto unseen. And at the same time, this realm closes us off from things as they are in themselves. Maybe, just maybe, now you understand why Heidegger says in his letter on humanism that it may just as well be that nature never shows us, in any of the results we pull out from her, what she is in essence. Again, there is no experience of flying a spaceship to outer space. There isn't. There is nothing, no experiential value that really can tell you, for pure empirical observation, how to get a spaceship to Mars. Yes, there can be, as soon as you have built a rocket and then you fly it and you get certain results. But again, look at what's happening. The results are used to be pulled back into the experiment, which itself already was thought up in the transcendental plane, where in an a priori manner it was posited and established in such a way so that this experiment became possible in the first place. The experiment of modern science is vastly different, completely different, from fundamentally ontologically different from an observation of nature. There's nothing being observed. What's being observed is whether the hypothesis holds up and what can be pulled out from the appearances and the manifold through a transcendental apperception of pushing it together so that what is found can be placed in the procrustes bed of the matrix of the sciences. And again, in a transcendental way, before any experience whatsoever. So, good old Kant is to blame or to thank for airplanes and spaceships. It is with transcendental logic, and the result of which is the knowledge of domination, of control, of Herrschaftswissen, that flying to Mars and flying to the moon and having satellites around this globe, observing everything happens, or that was burst open with the thinking up of the transcendental realm, which you should not, of course, conflate with anything transcendent or so. It's transcendent in the sense, that it tears into a dimension of being that was hitherto unseen. So maybe that shows us to some degree, or to a large degree, why we need to understand Kant and all the thinkers that came after him: Fichte, Schelling, Hölderlin, Hegel. Thank you very much.